Nexus Station drifted at the center of the Corvell expanse like a slow-turning coin flipped into the dark. Its outer ring, 3 kilometers of reinforced alloy and diplomatic architecture, caught the light of a distant binary star and threw it back in long, cold streaks across the docking bays. Once every 100 years, the Concord of Free Worlds opened its doors here to host the Ascendancy Accord, a summit where the galaxy's great military powers gathered to remind each other, politely and with great ceremony, exactly how much firepower they controlled. This year, for the first time in the summit's 800-year history, an invitation had gone out to a species that had never sat at that table before. "It's a mistake," said High Marshal Threx, tugging at the ceremonial collar of his dress uniform with 3 long fingers. His skin shifted in slow waves between slate blue and ash gray, a nervous habit his people never quite grew out of. Through the observation window of the Vortain delegation's private lounge, he watched ship after ship dock at the station's outer arms. "A calculated one maybe, but a mistake all the same. The charter is clear," replied Warlord Asa without looking up from the data slate in her hands. She was built like a small mountain given purpose. 4 broad shoulders, russet scales that drank the light rather than reflecting it, a presence that made most delegates instinctively step back when she entered a room. Any species that achieves stable faster-than-light transit for longer than 1 full galactic cycle is entitled to a seat. The humans crossed that threshold 3 years ago. The Conquered had no legal ground to exclude them, even if half the council wanted to. Legal ground. Threx made a sound that might have been a laugh in a species with a larynx built for one. They've had the stars for what, 30 years? Barely enough time to learn which end of a starship points forward. And yet here they are. Asa finally looked up, her eyes narrowing with something between amusement and irritation. "Try not to embarrass yourself in front of them, Threx. It reflects poorly on the rest of us." Across the station, in 3 other private lounges reserved for the summit's most powerful delegations, similar conversations were unfolding with the particular flavor of contempt reserved for the unfamiliar. Overmind Kiz, speaking through the chittering harmonics of the Carax's hive tongue, was explaining to a cluster of junior officers exactly why the human contingent's ships would be laughably outmatched by even a minor swarm detachment. General Drun of the Bastion Conquered, his rock-hewn features carved permanently into an expression of stern disapproval, grunted something dismissive about primitive engineering to anyone within earshot. And Seer Lith of the Ashara Convergence, whose luminous, half-translucent form seemed to absorb the ambient light of the room rather than reflect it, said nothing at all, simply watching the docking bay with quiet, patient eyes. 5 delegations. 5 of the oldest, most decorated military powers charted in known space, and on the subject of the newcomers they were, for once, in perfect agreement. Humans did not belong here. The great doors of the station's central promenade hissed open precisely on schedule, and the ambient noise of the crowded hall dropped by half. A single figure walked through, alone, unhurried, dressed in a plain charcoal gray service uniform with no more decoration than a single insignia at the collar. No entourage, no honor guard, no fanfare. Fleet Commander Sarah Voss, announced the station's mediator drone, its voice smooth and genderless, carrying across the hall without seeming to originate from any single point. Representing the United Earth Defense Coalition. Voss inclined her head politely to the assembled crowd, her expression calm, almost unreadable. Not cold exactly, but composed in a way that made several of the older delegates instinctively recalculate their assumptions before they'd even spoken to her. "Thank you for the invitation," she said, her voice carrying easily without being raised. "Earth is honored to be here." High Marshal Threx was the first to approach, closing the distance with the deliberate, unhurried stride of someone accustomed to being the largest presence in any room. He stood a full head and a half taller than she did. "Commander Voss, I confess we did not expect your species to accept the invitation so readily." His tone was pleasant enough on the surface. The insult carried underneath it like a current beneath still water. The accord can be overwhelming for those unaccustomed to true military scale. "I imagine it can be." Voss offered a small, unbothered smile. "We're looking forward to learning." Warlord Asa arrived next, her heavy footfalls sending a faint tremor through the polished floor. "Commander, your species has accomplished a great deal in a short span of time. This summit, however, showcases the pinnacle of what real military power looks like. I hope you won't find the comparison too discouraging." "I appreciate the concern," Voss said, unbothered. "But I'm not here to be discouraged. I'm here to observe and to share." One after another, the delegation leaders introduced themselves, each greeting wrapped in the same thin diplomatic tissue over the same blunt implication: "You don't belong here, and everyone in this room knows it." Overmind Kiz's mandibles clicked in a rhythm that translated roughly to polite laughter. General Droon offered a grunt and a handshake that could have crushed stone. Seer Lith simply studied her for a long moment with luminous eyes, saying nothing, before offering the faintest incline of her head. Voss met every single one of them with the same quiet, level courtesy. No posturing, no defensiveness, no visible reaction at all to the condescension layered into every word aimed at her. The station's mediator chimed softly overhead. "All delegations have arrived. Please proceed to the Grand Presentation Hall for the opening ceremony." The Grand Hall had been built to inspire awe, and on this day it did exactly that. A massive holographic sphere dominated the chamber's center, currently rendering a slow-rotating image of Nexus Station itself, surrounded by the assembled fleets of every attending power. The 5 alien delegation leaders took their places on the raised central dais. Voss was directed to a smaller seat at the periphery, a subtle, deliberate statement about where the Concord believed the newcomers ranked. If the slight bothered her, she didn't show it. A tall, faceless figure of shifting silver light drifted to the center of the stage, the council mediator, the closest thing the Accord had to a neutral authority. Its voice, when it spoke, seemed to come from everywhere in the hall at once. "Welcome to the 800th Ascendancy Accord," it intoned. "For 8 centuries, this gathering has preserved balance among the galaxy's great powers through mutual demonstration and mutual restraint. Today, for the first time, we welcome a new voice to this table, the humans of Earth." The applause that followed was polite. It was also, Voss noted, remarkably thin. Barely a third of the hall bothered to participate. "We will begin, as tradition dictates, with presentations from our 5 established powers," the mediator continued, "followed by our newest member. High Marshal Threx, you may begin." Threx rose with obvious relish, activating a control at his wrist. The central hologram shifted, resolving into the sleek, angular silhouette of a warship that seemed to flicker in and out of visibility even in the projection. "The Nightfall-class strike cruiser," he announced, pride ringing through his translated words. "The pride of the Vorthane fleet. Adaptive phase camouflage renders it functionally invisible to every known detection array in charted space. It can slip into an enemy system, deliver a decisive strike, and vanish before a single alarm sounds." He glanced deliberately toward Voss. 2 centuries of refinement went into this technology. The perfect predator needs no armor, only the certainty that it can never be seen. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the hall as the hologram demonstrated the ship's cloaking sequence, fading from solid metal to shimmering nothing in the space of a breath. Warlord Asa went next, and the image that replaced Threx's sleek cruiser was something altogether different. A colossal, brutal dreadnought bristling with weapon emplacements along every surface. "The Iron Maw," she growled, evident pride roughening her voice. "The largest warship ever constructed by the Keth Dominion. Its primary cannon can fracture a planet's crust from high orbit. No fleet in recorded history has stood against it and survived first contact." The hologram demonstrated on an uninhabited moon, the cannon's discharge splitting the small body into a spray of glowing fragments. A collective gasp rolled through the assembled delegates. One after another, the remaining powers unveiled their pride. Overmind Kiz's swarm hive released a shimmering cloud of 10,000 coordinated fighter drones that moved as a single fluid organism. General Droon's Bastion-class dreadnought demonstrated shielding so dense that simulated capital-grade weapons fire simply dissipated against its surface, like rain against stone. Seer Lith's presentation was the strangest of all, a ship called the Whisper Mind, which, according to Lith's soft explanation, could project waves of psychic dread into an enemy crew, inducing surrender without a single shot fired. After each presentation, eyes drifted almost involuntarily to Voss, searching her face for the telltale signs of intimidation, of awe, of the humbling every newcomer was supposed to feel. She gave them nothing. She watched. She occasionally made a small note on a datapad, and once or twice she nodded with what looked like genuine professional appreciation for a particularly elegant piece of engineering. But there was no fear in her expression. No wonder. Just calm, careful attention. The look of someone taking inventory, not someone being overwhelmed. When the fifth presentation concluded, the mediator turned toward the small seat at the edge of the dais. Commander Voss, the Council now welcomes Earth's presentation. Threx's translated voice carried a note of open amusement. Yes, human. Show us what your young species has managed to scrape together. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through parts of the hall. Voss rose, unhurried, and walked to the center platform. She did not activate the hologram. Instead, she simply looked around the room, meeting eyes across 5 very different, very ancient species. Thank you for your demonstrations, she said. They were genuinely impressive. Earth's contribution to this showcase is still en route. It will arrive tomorrow morning. Silence, then a ripple of murmurs, some surprised, some openly mocking. Your vessel is late? Overmind Kiz's mandibles clicked rapidly in what passed for laughter among the hive. Not late, Voss said, entirely unbothered. On schedule. Some things are worth waiting for. Ossa leaned forward, curiosity briefly overtaking her disdain. Why not simply show us holographic specifications as the rest of us have? We prefer real demonstrations over simulations, Voss replied, offering the faintest hint of a smile. I think you'll understand tomorrow. As the session adjourned and the hall slowly emptied, the 5 delegation leaders gathered near the exit, watching the human commander walk away with unhurried, even steps. Did you see her face? Kiz asked, mandibles still clicking with residual amusement. No reaction. None at all. Either humans lack the capacity to appreciate what they witnessed today, or, Lith said quietly, her luminous eyes fixed on the door Voss had exited through, they possess something they believe will impress us, which, given what we've just seen, seems difficult to credit. We'll find out tomorrow, Ossa said, waving a dismissive hand. And I suspect we'll all be thoroughly underwhelmed. None of them noticed the small, private smile that crossed Voss's face as she rounded the corner out of sight, or the brief, quiet message she keyed into her wrist device. Stage is set, bring her home. Bring. The evening reception filled Nexus Station's observation dome with a soft wash of starlight and the low murmur of 100 different languages layered over one another. Delegates and officers from every corner of charted space mingled beneath a curved ceiling of transparent alloy that showed the full sweep of the surrounding fleets. Dozens of alien warships arranged in careful, deliberate formation, each positioned to be seen at its most flattering angle. A quiet parade of pride, frozen in orbit. Voss stood alone near the curved viewport, a drink she hadn't touched yet in one hand, watching the assembled ships with the same careful, measuring gaze she'd worn all day. Admiring superior engineering, Commander? She turned to find Threx approaching, 2 drinks balanced in his long fingers. He offered her one, and she accepted with a polite nod. I appreciate good engineering wherever I find it, she said, taking a small measured sip. The liquid carried a faint note of something like cinnamon, unfamiliar and not unpleasant. Your reaction to today's presentations was unusual, Threx said, his 3 eyes blinking in their slow, staggered sequence. Most newcomers to this summit leave the opening ceremony visibly rattled. Voss allowed herself a small smile. Earth has an old saying, High Marshal. Never show your hand too early in the game. Hand. Game. Threx's translator hesitated on the idiom. It means you don't reveal your strength before the moment calls for it. Before Threx could respond, Ossa's booming voice rolled across the dome, cutting easily through the ambient conversation. There she is, the human who keeps the whole summit waiting. The massive Keth commander pushed through the crowd with the other 3 delegation leaders trailing behind her. So mysterious about your vessel, Commander, Asa said, looming over Voss by nearly a full meter. Surely you could offer us at least a schematic, a hint. I prefer to let results speak for themselves, Voss said, taking another slow sip. Another Earth saying? Kiz's mandibles clicked with quiet amusement. Perhaps there is nothing to show. Perhaps this is simply, what is your word, bluffing. That would be an unwise assumption, Voss replied, her tone still calm, still even, but with a thread of steel underneath it now. Earth doesn't bluff about military matters. General Drun's rumbling laugh sounded like stone grinding against stone. Bold words, human. Tell me, what could your species possibly build that would compare to what we witnessed today? You've had interstellar travel for what, 3 decades? We've been crossing the void for millennia. Voss turned to face all 5 of them squarely, and something in the hall seemed to quiet, other conversations trailing off as nearby delegates noticed the confrontation forming. You're right that we're newcomers to space, she said. But you're wrong to assume that means we're behind in every way that matters. Lith, who had remained silent through the exchange, stepped forward, her luminous eyes studying Voss with sharp, curious intensity. You speak with remarkable confidence for a representative of a species that has never before attended this summit. Experience isn't only measured in centuries, Seer, Voss said. Sometimes it's measured in intensity. Explain, Asa demanded, arms crossed over her broad chest. Voss looked slowly around the circle of alien commanders. How many major conflicts has your species fought in the last 500 years, Warlord Asa? The question seemed to catch her off guard. 3 major campaigns, all decisive victories for the Keth Dominion. Voss nodded and turned to the next. High Marshal? 2 wars of territorial expansion, Threx admitted. 4 defensive conflicts. Kiz's mandibles clicked, the amusement draining slowly from his tone. 1 great war 3 centuries past, Drun rumbled. The Ashara avoid open conflict wherever it can be avoided, Lith said softly. 1 defensive engagement within recorded memory. Voss nodded slowly, absorbing each answer. Earth's recorded history includes more than 15,000 documented conflicts. In the 500 years before we reached the stars, we fought over 300 major wars. Our single most devastating conflict claimed nearly 100 million lives in the span of 6 years. The 5 commanders stared at her in stunned silence. That's barbaric, Threx finally managed. That's survival, Voss corrected, her voice level and without a trace of pride or shame. We built better weapons because we had no other choice. We perfected the science of warfare because failure meant extinction, not defeat. While your civilizations were building peace among the stars, we were still testing weapons against each other capable of leveling cities in seconds. An uncomfortable silence spread through the small crowd that had gathered to listen. Even the ambient chatter of the dome seemed to dim. Asa broke the tension with a short, forced laugh. Bold talk from a small species. Tomorrow we'll see whether there's any truth behind it. Indeed we will, Voss said simply. The reception continued around them, but the 5 commanders kept a careful, deliberate distance from her for the rest of the evening, eventually retreating to the far side of the dome to speak among themselves in low, urgent voices. Do you believe her? Kiz asked, mandibles clicking uncertainly now, all trace of earlier mockery gone. 15,000 wars, it seems impossible. No species could survive that scale of conflict, Drun rumbled, unless they became extraordinarily good at waging it. That is precisely the concern, Threx said quietly, his skin cycling through darker shades of blue-gray. Asa shook her massive head. Talk is easy. Tomorrow we see this supposed human warship and I fully expect to be unimpressed. I'm not so certain, Lath said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sense no deception in her, only anticipation. Across the dome, Voss caught fragments of their conversation with the enhanced clarity of a hearing implant standard to every coalition officer, though she gave no outward sign of it. The faint, private smile that touched her lips went entirely unnoticed as she turned back toward the viewport, her eyes drifting toward a particular unremarkable patch of darkness far beyond the edge of the station's sensor range. Morning came to Nexus Station as its slow rotation carried the primary habitation ring back into the light of the system's binary star. Voss stood in her quarters, straightening the collar of her uniform in front of a narrow mirror, when her wrist communicator chimed softly. "Voss here." "Commander, this is Captain Reyes aboard the Warden. We're standing by whenever you're ready." "Perfect timing, Captain." Voss allowed herself a small smile at her own reflection. "Hold position just outside the outer sensor perimeter until I give the signal." "Understood, ma'am. The crew's looking forward to this." "So am I, Captain." Voss out. By the time she reached the presentation chamber, all 5 delegation leaders were already seated, along with what appeared to be the entire remaining summit attendance. Word of the pending reveal had clearly spread through the station overnight, and curiosity had won out over pride. "Commander Voss," the mediator's voice echoed through the hall. "The Council awaits Earth's contribution to this summit." Voss took her place at the center platform. "Thank you, mediator. Earth is honored to present." She activated her wrist device, and the great central hologram flickered to life, showing at first nothing but empty, star-scattered space just beyond the station's outer perimeter. "Where is it?" someone called from the crowd, not bothering to hide their impatience. Voss tapped her device again. "Captain Reyes, bring her in." The hologram's view shifted, the projection automatically adjusting to track a distant object that had just entered detection range. At first, nothing about it seemed remarkable. A distant point of reflected light, indistinguishable from any of the 1,000 other ships currently docked at or orbiting the station. Then the station's sensors began to recalculate its distance and dimensions, and recalculate again and again. A ripple of confused murmurs spread through the crowd. "That can't be accurate," Osa said, staring hard at the readout scrolling beside the hologram. "The sensors must be malfunctioning." "The sensors are working perfectly," Voss replied, calm as ever, as the object drew closer and its true silhouette finally resolved on the display. It was a ship, but unlike anything the gathered delegates had ever encountered. Where every vessel in the room's collective experience favored graceful curves and elegant hull lines, this ship was built entirely from hard angles and flat, unbroken planes. Its dark hull seemed to swallow the ambient starlight rather than reflect it, a void black shape cut against the stars. The holographic display, built to comfortably render the largest known warships in charted space, visibly struggled to fit the entire vessel within its projection field. "I present," Voss said, her voice carrying easily across the stunned silence of the chamber, "the UES Warden, a mid-tonnage escort vessel from Earth's deep space defense fleet." The room erupted. The 5 delegation leaders sat frozen, staring at a ship that made their proudest creations look, suddenly and unmistakably, like toys assembled by children. Threx found his voice first. "Mid-tonnage?" he asked, weakly. Voss nodded. "Yes, High Marshal. We have smaller vessels, and we have considerably larger ones." The chamber had gone almost entirely silent now, 5 ancient military powers staring at a ship whose shadow, on the display, had grown large enough to eclipse the combined silhouette of every alien vessel currently orbiting the station. The boasting, it seemed, was finally over. The real demonstration was only beginning. The presentation chamber had settled into a heavy, uneasy quiet as the Warden continued its slow approach, each passing moment revealing another detail of its impossible scale. High Marshal Threx's blue-gray skin had paled to something closer to ash. "This is impossible," he said, finally breaking the silence. "No species builds vessels of this size. The resources alone, the engineering challenges, all solved," Voss said evenly. "The Warden was constructed within our home system's asteroid belt, using materials harvested directly from the surrounding debris field. It took our shipyards a little under 3 years to complete." 3 years? Kiz's mandibles clicked rapidly, an unmistakable note of alarm entering the rhythm now. Our swarm hive vessels take 2 decades to design and construct. We've learned to work quickly when the situation demands it, Voss replied simply. Asa stepped closer to the projection, studying the ship's hull with an expression that had shifted almost against her will, from disdain to something closer to grudging respect. What are its weapon systems, Commander? Before Voss could answer, an alarm began to sound throughout the station. First a single tone, then a chorus of them, layered across every deck. The Mediator's silvery form rippled with visible alarm as it drifted forward. Unauthorized weapon activation detected, it announced, its calm tone fraying at the edges for the first time since the summit began. Multiple vessels across the fleet are powering defensive systems. On the secondary displays lining the chamber walls, the gathered delegates could see their own ships shifting into defensive formation, shields flaring to life, weapon arrays coming online across every allied fleet in the sector. "Stand down," Drun barked into his communicator. "This is not an attack." "The same alerts are triggering across my fleet," Threx said, his 3 eyes blinking in rapid, distressed sequence as status reports scrolled across his wrist display. "The automated defense grid has flagged the human vessel," Kiz reported, mandibles clicking with genuine anxiety now. "It's been classified as a potential planet killer class threat." More alarms joined the chorus as the station itself shifted into emergency protocol, blast doors sealing throughout the lower decks, non-essential systems powering down across the ring. "Station Nexus is now at Defense Condition 1, the station's AI announced overhead. "All non-essential personnel, please proceed immediately to designated shelters." Lith turned to Voss, her luminous eyes wide and intense. "Your ship has triggered every defensive system in this sector, Commander. What exactly have you brought to this summit?" Voss remained remarkably composed amid the escalating chaos. "Exactly what I said it was, a mid-tonnage escort vessel. My apologies for the alarm. The Warden's passive sensor signature is considerably stronger than we anticipated it would register at this range." She tapped her wrist device. "Captain Reyes, power down all offensive systems and broadcast peaceful intent on every open frequency, please." Reyes's voice came back through the comm, calm and professional. "Already in progress, Commander. We're showing full transparency to station control and every vessel in range. Weapons cold. Shields at minimum standby." Slowly, deck by deck, the alarms began to quiet. The 5 delegation leaders huddled together, speaking in urgent low tones as they worked to reassure their own fleets over private channels. When the last alarm finally faded, Voss turned toward the Mediator. "With your permission," she said, "I'd like to extend an invitation to the 5 delegation leaders, a tour aboard the Warden itself. It may help ease any remaining concerns." The Mediator's featureless silver face gave no indication of emotion, but its voice carried an unmistakable note of surprise. "You would permit foreign military commanders aboard your own vessel, unescorted?" "Of course," Voss said. "This is a showcase, after all. Earth has nothing to hide." The 5 commanders exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, Threx stepped forward. "I accept the invitation." One by one, the others followed his lead, though General Drun did so with visible, grinding reluctance. "Excellent," Voss said. "We'll depart from the station's main shuttle bay within the hour." The journey to the Warden took considerably longer than any of them had anticipated, a detail that only reinforced how badly their sensors had misjudged the ship's true distance and, by extension, its true scale. As the transport shuttle finally drew close, all 5 commanders pressed toward the viewports, unable, or unwilling, to hide their growing awe. From this range, the Warden blotted out the stars entirely, a dark angular mountain suspended in the void. "By the depths," Asa whispered. "It's larger even than the scan suggested." "Our sensors struggled to resolve its true dimensions," Voss explained. "The hull material absorbs the majority of standard scanning frequencies." The shuttle finally settled into a bay large enough to comfortably house any of the alien flagships with room to spare. Inside, the Warden's interior hummed with quiet, disciplined efficiency. Hundreds of smaller craft, fighters and support vessels alike, arranged in flawless rows. Crew moved through the bay with brisk, practiced purpose, sparing barely a glance at their arriving guests. A woman in a captain's uniform stood waiting as they disembarked. "Welcome aboard the Warden," she said, offering a crisp salute. "Captain Elena Reyes. Commander Voss has arranged a full tour." "How many crew does this vessel require?" Kiz asked, watching the organized chaos of the bay with evident fascination. "Standard complement runs just over 14,000 personnel," Reyes replied, "though she can function with as few as 500 in an emergency." 14,000? Drun rumbled in disbelief. "The Bastion requires barely 2,000. "Different design philosophy," Voss said with a faint smile. "We believe strongly in redundancy." The tour began on the bridge, a sprawling command center with stations enough for hundreds of officers, every display practical and unadorned compared to the elaborate, colorful interfaces favored by the alien vessels they'd left behind. "Your technology seems, if I may say, less refined than I expected," Threx observed, studying a navigation console with open curiosity. "We favor reliability over flourish," Reyes said. "Every critical system carries at least 3 independent backups. Nothing aboard this ship fails completely, not without a great deal of very bad luck." They moved deeper into the vessel. Crew quarters, medical bays, sprawling recreational decks that all pointed toward a single, unmistakable conclusion. "This ship is built for extended deployment," Lith noted quietly. 5 years is standard," Voss confirmed, "though we've never actually needed to test the full duration." The engineering section revealed a cluster of massive fusion reactors, presided over by a stocky, weathered chief engineer named Park, who explained the systems with obvious pride. 6 primary reactors, 12 secondaries. More than enough power to sustain a small colony, but it was the weapons control center that finally silenced every remaining trace of doubt. Row after row of officers monitored systems that made the aliens' proudest weapons look, in direct comparison, almost quaint. "Kinetic impact rails," a weapons officer explained, gesturing to one long bank of controls. "Accelerate solid projectiles to near-light velocities. No known shield technology can fully arrest that kind of kinetic transfer." She indicated a second section. "Plasma lance batteries, cut through capital-grade hull plating the way a blade goes through cloth." "And that?" Asa asked, pointing toward the largest display in the room, where a team of officers monitored a cluster of massive cylindrical objects secured deep within the ship's core. The officer glanced toward Voss, who nodded her permission. "Nova-class ordnance," she said simply, "designed to replicate a localized stellar collapse on detonation. We carry 12. The silence that followed was absolute. Each of the 5 commanders was thinking, in that moment, the exact same thought. Weapons of that magnitude weren't built to destroy ships. They were built to erase fleets, worlds. Why? Lith finally asked, her glowing eyes dimmed with something close to horror. Would any civilization build such things? Voss's expression grew serious for the first time since the tour began. "Because we learned very early and very painfully that being unprepared for a threat can mean extinction. We build ships like the Warden not because we want war, Seer Lith. We build them because we never again want to face an enemy we cannot defeat." As they made their way back toward the shuttle bay, the 5 commanders walked in subdued, thoughtful silence, their earlier boasts feeling suddenly very small and very far away. "There's one more thing you should know," Voss said as they prepared to board the shuttle. "The Warden is one of 30 vessels of comparable capability currently in service across Earth's defense fleet." Threx's 3 eyes went wide. 30? "Humanity takes its own defense very seriously," Voss said simply. "Very seriously indeed." As the shuttle pulled away, all 5 commanders looked back at the Warden with an understanding that hadn't existed in any of them 24 hours earlier. They had come to this summit to showcase their own considerable might, only to discover a species whose capacity for warfare exceeded anything any of them had ever imagined possible. The boasting had ended. In its place, something new was beginning to take root. Respect, tinged unmistakably with fear. The 5 commanders returned to Nexus Station in near total silence, each lost in private, uneasy thought over what they had witnessed. Word of the Warden had already spread through every corridor and lounge of the station by the time their shuttle docked, and a crowd had gathered to meet them. "Well?" an eager young Vorthane officer asked as Threx emerged. "Is it truly as large as the sensor logs claim?" "Larger," Threx said quietly. "Considerably larger." The commanders were quickly surrounded by officers from their own fleets, all demanding details about what they'd seen aboard the human vessel. Voss stood back, watching the animated, half-frightened conversations with a small, private smile, until the mediator drifted toward her. "Commander Reynolds, forgive me, Voss." It corrected itself. "The Council formally requests a full demonstration of your vessel's operational capabilities." "The Warden is prepared," Voss said with a nod. "We'll need a location clear of the station, somewhere without risk to inhabited space. The outer system contains a debris field from a long-destroyed moon," the mediator suggested. "It would provide suitable targets without endangering any populated region." "Perfect," Voss agreed. "We can begin within 2 hours." News of the demonstration spread through the station like wildfire. By the appointed hour, the observation dome was filled well beyond its rated capacity, representatives of every attending species crowding for a view. The 5 commanders stood at the front of the assembled crowd, their earlier arrogance replaced now by open, uneasy anticipation. Voss stood beside the holographic controls, coordinating quietly with Captain Reyes. "We're in position, Commander," Reyes reported. "Targeting locked on the debris field, awaiting your order." Voss turned to address the packed dome. "Today, the Warden will demonstrate 5 key capabilities, one corresponding to each of the specialties presented at yesterday's opening ceremony. We believe strongly in learning from our neighbors." Threx's eyes narrowed slightly at that. Had the humans somehow acquired knowledge of their proprietary technology? Voss caught the look and simply continued unbothered. The hologram resolved to show the Warden positioned at the edge of the vast debris field, a dark shape against a scattering of broken rock and shattered moon fragments. First demonstration, stealth capability. Voss's gaze settled briefly on Threx. High Marshal Threx's Nightfall-class cruiser impressed us all with its adaptive camouflage yesterday. The Warden approaches the same problem rather differently. On the display, the massive human vessel shimmered once and then, impossibly, vanished entirely. "Where did it go?" someone in the crowd demanded. "The Warden is currently operating under full stealth protocol," Voss explained. "A layered approach combining refractive plating, active sensor dampening, and phase shift concealment." Threx leaned forward, scanning the display for any trace of the vessel with his own equipment. "Our sensors can detect any cloaked ship in known space," he said, activating a handheld scanner with visible determination. "Allow me to demonstrate." "Please," Voss said, gesturing toward the field. "Try to find us." Several increasingly frustrated minutes passed before Threx finally looked up, something like genuine unease crossing his features. "Nothing," he admitted. "Not even a residual heat signature." Voss tapped her wrist device. "Phase 1 complete, Captain. Proceed to Phase 2. The Warden reappeared abruptly, in an entirely different position within the debris field than before. "The ship doesn't merely conceal itself," Voss explained. "It repositions while fully undetectable. In an engagement, this allows us to shift tactical position without ever revealing intent." Asa grunted, an unmistakable note of reluctant approval creeping into her voice. "Impressive, but stealth means little without decisive firepower behind it." "Agreed," Voss said, nodding. "Which brings us to our second demonstration, offensive capability." She gestured toward the display. "Warlord Asa's Iron Maw showed us yesterday what a planet-cracking weapon looks like. Allow the Warden to show you ours." The display zoomed in as panels along the ship's dark hull slid open in sequence, revealing row upon row of weapon emplacements, some extending long metal rails, others glowing with barely contained energy. "Target acquired," Reyes's voice reported over the open channel. "Kinetic rail system engaged." A series of brilliant flashes lit the debris field, and in an instant several massive chunks of shattered moon simply ceased to exist, converted in a heartbeat into expanding clouds of fine dust. Those projectiles impact at roughly 98% light speed, Voss explained calmly. The kinetic energy alone is sufficient to vaporize nearly any known material on contact. Before the crowd could fully process what they'd witnessed, the warden shifted position again, and beams of searing energy lanced into the debris field. Where they touched, rock didn't shatter. It melted, boiled, and slowly dissolved into vapor. Plasma lance batteries, Voss continued, capable of cutting cleanly through any known hull composition. Osa's massive form had gone very still, her arms folded tightly across her chest as she watched her own specialty matched and quietly, decisively surpassed. Third demonstration, Voss announced. Coordinated drone capability. Kiz's mandibles clicked nervously as the warden's massive bay doors slid open on the display. What emerged wasn't hundreds of craft, but thousands, pouring from the ship's hull in a single fluid coordinated wave. Our autonomous combat drones operate under distributed AI coordination, Voss explained. Each unit maintains tactical independence while remaining strategically synchronized with the whole. The swarm moved through the debris field like water finding its path, striking every remaining fragment with surgical, merciless precision. The warden carries roughly 10,000 combat drones. What you're seeing represents approximately 20% of full operational capacity. Kiz said nothing at all. His hive's proudest creation, the swarm cloud, carried barely 2,000 units in total. Fourth demonstration, Voss continued, turning toward General Drone. Defensive systems. General Drone's shielding impressed the summit yesterday. Allow us to show you ours. The display shifted to show the warden positioning itself before a particularly massive fragment of the destroyed moon, easily the size of a small asteroid, propelled toward the ship by engines placed earlier in preparation. Impact in 10 seconds, Reyes reported. A shimmer of light bloomed around the warden as its shields engaged, not as a single solid barrier, but in distinct layered fields, each visibly separate from the last. The massive asteroid struck the outermost layer and disintegrated instantly, not into large fragments but into fine, harmless dust that drifted uselessly across the remaining shield layers beneath. Our defensive architecture uses sequential fields, Voss explained. Each layer is tuned to neutralize a specific category of threat. In the warden's entire operational history, nothing has ever penetrated all 7 layers. Drun's stone features remained as unreadable as ever, but his massive hands had curled slowly into fists at his sides. Finally, Voss said, turning toward Seer Lith. Our 5th demonstration. Psychological countermeasures. Lith's luminous eyes widened sharply. You cannot demonstrate that capability here, she said, an edge of real alarm entering her voice. My vessel isn't even attempting to project. Precisely, Voss said with the faintest trace of a smile. The warden's cognitive dampening field has been active continuously since we entered this system. Had your whisper mind attempted to project at any point during this summit, your own crew would have experienced significant discomfort long before any effect reached us. Lith took an involuntary step backward. That should be impossible. No species has ever developed an effective countermeasure to Ashara mental projection. Humanity has faced a great many challenges throughout its history, Voss said quietly, including some that attacked the mind rather than the body. We adapted, as we always have. She deactivated the display, and the observation dome fell into heavy, contemplative silence as the gathered representatives absorbed what they had just witnessed. The 5 capabilities I've demonstrated today represent only a small fraction of the warden's full systems, Voss said. Earth arrived late to the stars, but we brought with us thousands of years of hard-won military experience. She looked slowly around the circle of 5 commanders. We did not build these technologies to threaten our neighbors. We built them to ensure humanity would never again face an existential threat without the means to answer it. As the crowd began to disperse, murmuring in hushed, urgent tones about what they'd just witnessed, the 5 alien commanders drew together at the edge of the dome. This changes everything, Threx said quietly. If the humans field 30 vessels of this capability, they could dominate this entire quadrant of the galaxy, should they choose to. And yet they haven't, Asa finished. They've kept entirely to their own systems, Lith observed, building all of this in near total secrecy. Kiz's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The real question is, what do they want from us now? The final day of the Accord opened beneath a heavy, unmistakable weight of tension. Scheduled meetings and lesser presentations continued as planned, but only one subject dominated every private conversation across the station: the human ship, and what its existence meant for the fragile balance of power that had defined the galaxy for centuries. Voss sat alone in the station's garden dome that morning, enjoying a rare moment of quiet among plants gathered from 100 different worlds, the artificial sunlight warm against her face. "May I join you, Commander?" She looked up to find Seer Lith standing nearby, her luminous eyes dimmed to a soft, gentle pulse. Voss gestured to the empty seat beside her. "Of course, Seer." Lith settled gracefully, her movements fluid and precise, and for a long moment simply observed the garden in silence. "This is my favorite place on the station," she finally said. "It reminds me that despite our differences, all life shares certain fundamental needs: light, water, room enough to grow." "We're not so different when it comes down to it," Voss agreed. Lith turned to study her directly. "Your ship, your weapons, they speak of a species unlike any this council has ever encountered. Your capacity for warfare exceeds anything currently charted in known space. Our capacity for peace is just as great," Voss said. "We simply never allow ourselves to take it for granted." Before Lith could respond, her communicator chimed softly. "The council requests our presence," she said, checking the message. "All 5 commanders, and you." Voss rose. "Let's not keep them waiting, then." The council chamber was smaller than the main presentation hall, designed for careful private discussion rather than public spectacle. The mediator waited within, along with the 4 remaining commanders. "Thank you for coming," the mediator began once all were seated. "The events of this summit have raised concerns the council believes must be addressed directly." "Concerns?" Voss asked, though she had clearly anticipated exactly this meeting. "Your vessel represents a substantial shift in the established balance of power," the mediator continued. "The council requires a clear understanding of Earth's intentions." Voss looked slowly around the circle of 5 commanders, each watching her now with a careful mixture of caution and genuine curiosity. "Earth's intentions are simple," she said. "We wish to join the galactic community as equals, not as conquerors. The Warden, and the ships like her, exist for defense, not for aggression." "Defense against what, precisely?" Threx asked, his 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "No charted species currently possesses technology capable of meaningfully threatening vessels of that scale." Voss's expression grew serious. "The galaxy is vast, High Marshal. Humanity learned at great and repeated cost that it's far wiser to prepare for threats before they arrive than to scramble after the fact." "You speak as though you expect war," Asa observed. "We hope for peace," Voss said. "But we prepare for war regardless. That approach has served us well." Drun leaned forward, his stone features unreadable as always. "The truth, human. What does Earth actually want from this council?" Voss took a long moment before answering, and when she did, her voice carried quiet, unmistakable conviction. "Earth wants exactly what every civilization in this room wants: security. We built these ships because our history taught us again and again that strength earns respect, and that the strong are rarely attacked without cause." "Yet you concealed all of this until now," Kiz noted, mandibles clicking softly. "Why reveal it at this particular summit?" "Because isolation no longer serves our interests," Voss said. "Humanity stands at a genuine crossroads. We can continue developing entirely alone, or we can join with others who might benefit from what we've learned, just as we could benefit from what you've built in turn. We chose the latter." The mediator's silvery form shimmered faintly. "What exactly are you proposing, Commander Voss?" Voss straightened in her seat. Earth proposes a new defensive alliance. We offer our military capability to the Council, not as conquerors but as protectors. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full weight of the offer settled over the room. You want to become this galaxy's defenders? Threx asked, incredulous. We want to share what we've learned, Voss corrected gently. Earth developed advanced military technology out of sheer necessity. Your civilizations, meanwhile, have advanced remarkably in fields we've barely begun to explore, largely because you've enjoyed centuries of relative peace to pursue them. Together, I believe we could be considerably stronger than any of us are apart. Asa laughed, though this time notably without any trace of her earlier mockery. Your ships would form the foundation of such an alliance. Initially, yes, Voss agreed, but we're offering considerably more than warships. We're offering genuine partnership. Lith's eyes brightened as she considered this. A partnership in which each party contributes according to its own strengths. Precisely, Voss said, nodding. Earth doesn't seek to rule this galaxy. We seek to belong within it while doing what we do best and protecting those we've chosen to stand beside. The 5 commanders exchanged long, silent glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. The full council will need to vote on a proposal of this magnitude, the mediator reminded them. Every member species must have a voice in the outcome. Of course, Voss said easily. Earth can be patient. Earth. 3 days later, the vote was held. Representatives from every member species of the council gathered in the Grand Hall to decide formally whether to accept Earth's proposal. Voss waited outside, standing once more at the same viewport she'd occupied on the very first day of the summit. The doors slid open behind her, and she turned to find all 5 commanders approaching together. Commander Voss, Threx said, with unmistakable formality. The council has reached its decision. Voss straightened, bracing herself equally for either outcome. Earth has been accepted as a full member of this council, Threx continued. Your proposal for a defensive alliance has been approved, with certain conditions attached. Voss allowed herself a long, quiet breath. What conditions? Full knowledge exchange, Kiz explained, mandibles clicking with something that sounded for the first time like genuine excitement rather than derision. Your military expertise, in exchange for our own advances in medicine, energy systems, and deep space exploration. Joint training programs, Asa added. Your officers will train alongside ours and ours alongside yours. Oversight committees, Drun rumbled, to ensure this alliance serves every member equally, without exception. And cultural exchange, Lith finished, her eyes glowing warm and steady now. To build genuine understanding that reaches beyond mere military cooperation. Voss allowed herself a small, honest smile. Earth accepts every condition. Then it is settled, the mediator announced, drifting into the corridor to join them. The Galactic Defense Alliance is hereby formed, with Earth as a founding member. As they walked together toward the Grand Hall, where the rest of the assembled delegates waited, Threx fell into step beside her. I must ask, Commander, he said quietly. Were you truly confident the Council would accept the proposal? Voss allowed herself a small, genuine smile. I was hopeful. Humanity learned long ago that the surest way to prevent a war is to make the cost of starting one unbearably high for any would-be aggressor. The same basic principle applies here. This alliance benefits everyone, Threx observed. Your fleet protects Council space, and in turn, your civilizations help humanity grow beyond the endless cycle of warfare that shaped us, Voss finished. We've spent millennia perfecting the art of battle. Perhaps now together we can finally learn the art of lasting peace. As they entered the Grand Hall, the assembled representatives rose in unified acknowledgement. The 5 commanders who had once openly mocked humanity's presence at this summit now stood beside the very human commander whose ship had humbled every one of them in turn. And yet there was no bitterness in their posture, no lingering resentment in their eyes. There was only something new, respect, acceptance, and quietly beneath it all, a genuine measure of gratitude. That evening, as the Warden prepared to depart for Earth carrying news of the newly formed alliance, Voss stood once more in the station's observation dome. The 5 commanders joined her there, watching as their own fleets slowly shifted into formation around the massive human vessel, not in challenge this time, but in escort. To think, Asa said, a low, rumbling laugh in her voice. We once stood in this very room and boasted about our ships. Your ships remain genuinely impressive, Warlord, Voss assured her. They're simply different from ours. Different, Lith repeated thoughtfully. Perhaps that is precisely what makes this alliance so valuable. Not sameness. Difference. Each of us contributing what the others cannot. As they watched their combined fleets move together through the dark, the 5 ancient commanders and the newest member of the Galactic Council stood not as rivals any longer, but as allies. The boasting had ended. In its place, understanding had finally taken root, and somewhere out in the vast unmapped dark beyond Council space, whatever unknown threats might still be waiting would soon learn that the galaxy was now defended by both the accumulated wisdom of its oldest civilizations and the quiet, hard-earned resolve of its newest one. Humanity had arrived among the stars at last, not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as guardians. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. It genuinely means a lot. If you enjoyed this story, drop a like, leave a comment letting me know what you'd want to see next, and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next one. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story. Thanks again for watching.